Hey guys, this is Kyle at Projection Hub, and today I'm going to be showing you how to write a business plan for a co-working space. Now, before my time with Projection Hub, I was an SBA loan officer for almost 7 years, and so during my time there, I got the chance to review a few co-working space proposals, business plans. In my capacity, in that role, I would help businesses package their loan application, review their business plan, review the projections, take them through the underwriting process, and so I'm going to be using that perspective today to demonstrate what I think makes a lendable business plan. So, especially if your purpose of writing the business plan is to secure financing, I think you'll find this video very helpful. Projection Hub in general, we've helped more than 50,000 small businesses create their financial projections for business plans, loan applications, you name it. So, what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to be basically walking you through a fictitious example of a co-working space business plan. And it's a free template. It's a free version of that example. You can grab it down in the description below. You can follow along with that. So the main takeaway though today is I'm going to go through the whole thing, talk through the structure, but then I'm going to highlight 5 key points that I think can take the business plan from okay to really good, especially as it relates to, a lender reviewing it, and I think can increase your likelihood of getting approved. So that's the plan for today. I hope that you follow through to the end of the video. And let's go ahead and jump in. All right, so here we have our co-working space example business plans. Like I mentioned, you can grab your own copy of this down in the description below, no strings attached. What I forgot to mention in the intro is that if at any point you have a question about your co-working space business plan or the projections, which we'll talk about a little bit later on, you can comment on this video below. We monitor the comments there and we can get back to you, or you can contact us directly at support@projectionhub.com. You can go to our website, projectionhub.com too. You can chat with our team there. There's a number of different ways to get in touch with us. If you have questions, we'd be happy to help. Okay, so here we have an actual business plan example where we're going to go through this top to bottom. I'm going to talk about each section, a little bit of an assessment of each section, and then when we get to those 5 key points, I'll stop, I'll give some examples, I'll do some demonstrations. So it'll take us a couple sections to get to key point number 1. And then once we do, we'll kind of hit them bang, bang, bang pretty quickly. So let's go ahead and dive in here. So the first thing that I like to mention is why you need your business plan. Now it's probably obvious, but I think it's worth saying that the purpose of your business plan, assuming it's for a lender, is not to educate them on what a co-working space is. At this point, co-working space, shared workspaces are a known thing. It's not a novel concept anymore. So you don't need, save your precious page space from doing that. What we really want to try to do is you want to, as it states, a business plan. We want to articulate your specific plan to go from square zero, space 1, to success. And in the eyes of a lender, success would mean repaying your loan successfully. To you, it's probably profitability and making money and whatever down the road. And so the best thing we can do in our business plan is make our steps seem so attainable and realistic and tangible that there's no reason you shouldn't succeed, right? So when we get too vague and we get too high level and we get too overly optimistic, that's when we start to lose whoever's reading it, because you're not grabbing them with that. So that's really what we want to try to accomplish in our business plan. And hopefully some of my tips today will help that, you get to that point. Okay, so the first thing I want to point out here is our table of contents. So you can see kind of the structure of the business plan we're going to follow through here. But the other thing I want to point out is it's not super long. Okay, so maybe this will give you some relief, but a common misconception is that your business plan needs to be long to be good. And I will take the other side of that. I think that the opposite is kind of true. Now, you don't want to have a 5-page business plan that you don't put any effort into. But your business plan should be jam-packed full of important information. If you make it too long, all of those important details kind of get scattered, over 40 pages, 50 pages, 100 pages. And I can tell you from personal experience, your lender's not going to read 100 pages. They're not even going to read 50 pages probably. They're going to skim it probably once or twice. And they might miss some of those details, and that can hurt you. And so what we want to do is put all of the important things in the 15 pages, the 20 pages, the 25 pages. And the other thing I'll point out here is that the financial projections are almost half the business plan. The financial projections are without a doubt the most important part of your business plan. And again, I'm not just saying that speaking from Projection Hub, where that's our specialty, but I'm speaking on that from being a former lender. We would read the business plan once or twice, and we would review the projections a dozen times, a couple dozen times. So that's just something to keep in mind. But okay, let's go ahead and start going through these sections here. So first off, we've got our executive summary. So I want you to think about the executive summary as kind of like the cover letter to a resume for like a job application. So it's kind of the initial introduction to you. You know, maybe you just handed this business plan to your lender and they take a quick glance at it. They're probably going to look at this page. So, you know, you're not going to win them over on this page, but there's a chance that, you know, you might not, you know, leave a great first impression if you don't put some effort into this page. I like company overview. One thing I'll point out here is the objectives. And you'll hear this as a recurring theme. And just to point this out, you know, in this business plan example, it's a fictitious example, but it's also going to be like a little generalized. It's going to be missing some details because again, it's made up and it's meant to kind of give you placeholder text so you know where to write in your information. You're going to need to rewrite this in your own words, but the structure of the business plan should be the same. So it's going to be lacking some details. So that being said, for these objectives, I would encourage you to make your objectives measurable, right? So it's in the short term, instead of it being establish it as a premier co-working destination in Indianapolis, what does that even mean, right? So I would rather see a short-term goal that's like reach X number of, you know, how many members are you going to need to break even? Maybe that's reach 250 members within 12 months. Maybe that's break even by 18 months, right? So have a very specific goal like that. Same thing with long term. This says expand Sync Space's presence to other key cities in Indiana. Let's be a little bit more specific than that. Maybe it's we want to open up a second location by year 3 and a third location by year 5, right? Because the reason that's important is because these objectives don't mean anything. This doesn't communicate to me as the lender what you're trying to accomplish. But if I say I want to open a third and fifth location and your projections are going to try to reflect that, now I know what you're going after, right? You're looking through this as, you know, you really want to expand and grow this thing quickly. Okay. So it just kind of reframes that perspective. So details matter. Mission statement, you know, kind of self-explanatory there. Keys to success, you know, also I'm not saying don't include these things, but they should be fairly obvious what you need to do. And what actually are your keys to success? You know, is that tapping into a really large work from home community in your location? Is that tapping into, you know, maybe there's a really large business in your community that allows people to work hybrid schedules and they're looking for a place to work, right? And so maybe be specific about what you've thought about is like, what's really going to make this thing work? One thing that this executive summary is missing that I would encourage you to consider putting in here is a like financial details overview or highlights. So that could include, you know, your estimated startup cost, how much funding or financing are you seeking, when do you estimate breaking even, you know, that kind of thing. You can just give some quick tidbits there because again, for a lender that'll set the stage, right? If I know that you're trying to expand to multiple locations in years 3 and 5, and I know you're seeking $1.5 million, right? So now I know like, okay, they really want to grow this thing. And 2, like, okay, this is going to be kind of the big co-working space, right? So those types of details can put the right glasses on the lender as they read the rest of the business plan. But if they're still trying to sort out what the vibe of this is halfway through the business plan, that's not super helpful to them. Okay, moving on to the company description. This is kind of just an extension of the executive summary. You know, here you're going to get a chance to talk more about like the founding story, the background of like how this came to be. That doesn't need to be a page long, but like a nice paragraph, probably longer than this, about, you know, again, how this is kind of coming to be. Legal structure, self-explanatory. Unique selling proposition. If you're going to include a unique selling proposition, make sure that it's actually a unique selling proposition. So that is what sets you apart from the competition. What are you doing that nobody else is doing that you actually think is going to make a difference, that will actually drive new memberships? Do you have some sort of unique partnership set up? Do you have a connection to like a SaaS tool provider? So you'll be able to provide great subscription tool discounts to your members, right? So I don't know what that is in your case. Is that, your unique selling proposition is you're going to be located in a space that has a really popular food court or fitness center, or, I don't know what that might be, but think long and hard about like, what are you actually going to do that is different and make a difference in your ability to win over new members. And target market, this is just going to be the kind of the quick overview of your target market. So maybe location, the type of person in that location, maybe their income level, or is it freelancers? Are you trying to foster like a startup community? Is it more, remote and hybrid corporate employees? Like who's your ideal person you're trying to go after? Try to resist the temptation to just say like anybody that works from home or something like that. You want to get a little bit more, even though that may technically be true. If you can really refine that, it will help your approach to actually attract a person first, right? If you know how to go after the 2%, you might also just subsequently get the 3% of this other crowd over here, right? But you need to still have a goal of who to go after. I know we haven't hit a key point yet. As I mentioned, everything in the business plan is important. So I'm trying to give you some detail on that, but this section will include the first key point, okay? So market analysis, industry overview. This is not, and it's probably obvious, but this is not the like Shark Tank stereotype where they're like, the co-working shared workspace industry is a $3 trillion industry, and I would like to just capture 0.004% of that industry. Like, no, we don't need to hear that. What this needs to be is, although your lender may be a part of your community, maybe they're not. Maybe you're working with a lender that's one state over, or an online lender, or whatever that might be. And they may not be super tapped into the co-working space. So what this needs to do is you need to demonstrate that you have a good sense of the actual co-working landscape in your market, right? So, let's set that table here for them. Is it growing significantly? Is it very underserved? Is it, again, just try to paint that picture for them. A good portion, and these other sections are going to help do that. Okay, so this is kind of the tee up for that. Competitor analysis, very, very, very important, and definitely want more information that's provided in this example. So you'll see this says direct and indirect competitors along with their strengths and weaknesses. So, I would say focus more on the direct competitors in this example. An indirect example of a co-working space is not as prominent, I don't think, okay? So I would worry less about that and worry more about the direct competitors. But you should know every other co-working space or person who might be offering space to the people you want to attract, within it'll different based on your community, right? Depending upon how densely populated your target market is, that will change people's preference on how far they're willing to travel for that service. For example, I live in Indianapolis, Indiana, in the suburbs of it, so things are kind of spread out a little bit. And so people are willing, it's common to travel, 15 to 20 minutes to go to something you would like. If you live in a dense urban population downtown, you may be more inclined to want to be able to walk somewhere in 5 minutes. So it just changes the diameter of the space, who's your actual direct competitor. So when you understand that in your community, how far are you willing to travel to go somewhere? Then you need to know every single direct competitor inside that diameter. So let's say that's a 5 to 10 mile radius. List those direct competitors by name. If there's a lot of them, then just list the 3 to 5 most direct competitors. Say what they do really well or what their specialty is, and then say like, what are they not doing well? So an example of a strength might be, they have a really prime location. They're very tapped into the tech community, whatever their specialty might be. Maybe it's a very conducive to startup support. They have lots of resources, that kind of thing. Whereas an example of a weakness might be, maybe they have really terrible like Google reviews. Maybe it's It's one that's been around for a while and there hasn't been a lot of competition, and they just have really terrible reviews, or their amenities aren't great, or it's just a quiet place for people to show up and work, but there's not really any type of support, or whatever that might be. Talk about that, list those details. Target market analysis. This is kind of just an elaboration of what we talked about up here. So really describe who the actual best person you want in your co-working space is. And then market opportunities. This is kind of what I was alluding to earlier, where like market opportunity, okay, if there's no co-working spaces in like an entire town or city, that's an obvious market opportunity, okay? A more specific example might be, maybe there is a really, like I mentioned, like a large company that has shifted part of their workforce to a hybrid work from home, or whatever that might be, and some of those people are looking for a space to work. Maybe their home doesn't accommodate that, or something of that nature. So like that could be a really specific market opportunity that you could create something that serves that group of people. So just outline what that might be in your case and what's driving it. And if it's just that you think there's room to capture some of that, then that might be all you need to put. Okay, 15 minutes later, or whatever the timestamp is later, we've reached the key point, okay? But it'll move pretty quickly after this. First key point, and so to remind you what these key points are, what is going to take your business plan from good to really good, okay? So everything included so far, if you follow along, you do a detailed example of your own, you should have a good business plan. If you really hone in and try these key points, you should have a great business plan. Okay, so first one is market analysis. Provide some specific examples of local research to demonstrate that there is in fact room in the market for your business. So there's a few different ways we could do this, and I've included some examples, but you could also get creative and try to find out some other ways to do this. You could, this one right here is to basically do like market research. You could do free and premium versions of that. Premium, you hire someone to do the market research for you. They do some canvassing for you. They do some calling for you. They pull some data for you, that kind of thing. You could also do the free version of this, which is just you ask as many people as you can. Would they like another co-working space that does X, Y, Z in the community, or whatever that question needs to be. The other two that I really like, and these two are kind of a combination. So competitor analysis, do what I just described to you a couple minutes ago. Understand every single direct competitor in your radius, what they do really well, what they don't do well, what's an opportunity to steal from them or compete with them. But then the other part to this key point to match to that is you could do some free keyword research to understand some trends. And this could indicate like need or demand in the area. So let me show you what I mean. You can make a free Google AdWords account, and inside that account, they have a tool and then keyword planner. And what this allows you to do is simulate what people are searching on Google for in a specific location. Okay, so I have my location set to Indianapolis. There's gonna be a couple million people spread out around the city of Indianapolis. And I'm curious to see who's searching, or how often are people searching for these things. Co-working space near me, shared workspace near me. And this tool is gonna do a couple of really nice things. One, it's gonna give you some related keywords that maybe you couldn't think about. Maybe this gives you an idea of some specific things people are looking for. It's gonna tell you how often are people actually searching for that in your target area. So, and then it will also tell you like the typical range if you wanna pay for Google advertisement. And this competition just means like there's not a lot of people paying for keywords in that target area. But the most important thing to me using this tool is this trend data, okay? So 3 months change, less important to me because that's pretty seasonal. Year over year change. So in comparison, this year versus last year, these 12 months versus the last 12 months, I think is how it's set up. How many people in comparison are searching for these things? And you can see co-working space near me, co-working near me, and shared workspace near me are all up. 55%, 400%, 100%. Now these numbers aren't astronomically large, but this does indicate to me in that area, there's at least a growing interest in co-working space services. So you pair that with the competitor offering. So that's supply and demand, okay? This indicates the demand side. The number of competitors in your space indicates the supply side. And then you put those together to try and demonstrate some examples to the reader on what are your findings of that? Okay, so like maybe in your example, these numbers were even bigger and these percentages were still growing, and you do a Google search, and this is, again, pretty zoomed out. It would be unrealistic for me to assume everyone in Indianapolis can be my customer. Maybe you zoom back in. This is like a suburb of Indianapolis. And let's say those numbers are growing and there's only 4 or 5 co-working spaces, right? Like, demonstrate that in your business plan. That's great, right? It's proving, not only are you just saying like, yeah, I think there's room in the market. It's like, well, no, you've actually done research. Even if it's quick and it's free, that's something, right? That's better than nothing. That's going to prove some competency to your lender. It's something I would recommend doing. Okay, so that's key point number 1. Moving on, marketing and sales strategy. Again, you're going to need to include all this information. Outline your product or your service offerings or your membership offerings. So outline, are you going to have different tiered pricing? Are you going to have, desk space, office space? Are you going to have, different availables? Are you going to have, of every one of those types of memberships, are you going to have different tiers where they get different amenities or whatever? So outline everything you're going to include in that and what the price is going to be. That's pricing strategy. So include your pricing in that. Your sales strategy, right? So like when you actually get a lead or a prospect, like how are you going to try to close that? Distribution channel. So again, you're going to have a website, you're going to have social media, you're going to probably do some advertising. Like all of that's great. All of that's necessary. So make sure you do your version of what's included in here with as much detail as you can. I'm more interested in talking about key point number 2, which is much like key point number 1 on how do we take it from good and what's expected to great. And that is, and you'll notice the theme here, demonstrating customer acquisition and traction. Okay, so again, it's one thing to say, hey, we're going to build this and people are going to come. That's one way. You're just assuming like, yeah, this is a need, people are going to show up, which may be true. The next best thing you can do is demonstrate traction. Now, traction that's a very tech word, and that's like showing examples that people are excited about the thing that you're doing, or they're already using the thing that you're doing before you even launch. So it's kind of like this idea that people are going to be lined up or people are going to show up because of things you've already done, and you know that to be true. So let me give you some examples. Again, here are some examples. I think like number 4 on here is really creative. So maybe you have an interest in launching a co-working space, but you don't want to just open it and find out if people are going to show up. So instead, on the side, for free or very cheap, maybe you're in your extra time, you launch a virtual co-working space, and co-working space, and you try to connect with local remote employees, and basically trying to build a potential customer base by connecting with other work from home or remote employees that are looking for some connection. So maybe and they're local, right? So it's not people on the other side of the country, it's people in your community, and you start forming those connections. You can use that group to get feedback. Say, I'm thinking about opening a co-working space, let them have input on that. The larger you build that, it's like, that's your customer base, right? So when you have your business plan, you can say, we have a virtual co-working space or a Discord group or a Slack group or whatever, and there's 175 people in it, and we feel like at least 50% of them would pay for a membership if we launched today, right? So when I read that as a lender, I'm like, okay, they could have 80, 90 people right at the get-go. So you can be creative. There's some other ones like pre-launch workshops and networking events. You can get attendees to sign up for like a founders club discount or early bird discount, where it gives them a year for the first year. So you incentivize startups. So whatever you do, the best 2 examples of traction are pre-launch revenue, like actually making money before you officially launch, or names on a list, right? So it's one thing to say, yeah, we're going to build it, people are going to show up. It's another thing to tell your lender, we've got 275 people's names on a list that are all interested in coming to our thing. So not only is that great because it gives your lender confidence that this might actually, people are interested and they'll show up. The other thing that it does is it demonstrates to your lender that you're ready to hustle. And you've already been hustling. You have the grit. You've thought about this a lot. You've put a lot of effort into it, and you really want to see this work versus, you haven't really been tested yet. Okay, so that is key point number 2. Okay, moving along, operations management. Here's where you're just kind of going to get into demonstrating how the sausage is made, right? So just talk about the logistics of the co-working space. Each co-working space is a little bit different than another based upon like what's included, how it works for people to show up, access to the space, that kind of thing. So just, again, read this, do your version of that. That's going to make sense. You got security in here. There's even some marketing stuff that's bled into the section of this one. But key point number 3 that I really want to make sure you hit in this is demonstrating your relevant industry experience. So we want to make sure that the lender believes that you know what you're doing and you know what you're getting yourself into. And so, some red flags that can be triggered right here for lenders is if maybe you are coming from a career or your experience doesn't really line up with managing or owning a co-working space. And so we need to try and avoid causing that concern from them. The way we do that is, let's just say you've been like a marketing executive and you want to launch a co-working space. At first glance, those don't seem like they're that related, but there's some transferable skills there, right? Marketing and sales, maybe you've managed people before, maybe you've managed a budget before, different things. So like, talk about your experience and what skills will be valuable when you start this thing. But what you're also going to need to do is supplement your experience with someone else or other people that might have more direct experience. So maybe that could be a partner in the business. That could be a key employee, right? So maybe you've already identified a manager of the co-working space that has already been a manager of a co-working space before. So talk about what strengths you bring to the table from your prior experience. And if that is a little lackluster to give your lender confidence that you know what you're getting yourself into, supplement that, okay? And then talk about that here, okay? All right, the big one, financial projections, okay? So you can see in here, we've got startup costs and how it's broken down. We've got some co-working specific like KPIs here, which we'll talk about, key ratios, monthly recurring expenses or overhead right here. And then we've got 5 years of like a profit and loss statement or income statement, pro forma, cash flow projections, balance sheet projections, break-even point, sales growth, you name it. So quick plug, all of those financial statements and those charts were made using this template. Now, before I lose you, okay, you have to have financial projections. They are almost as important, or if not more important, than the business plan itself. And so the reality is you have to have financial projections, and there's really only 3 ways to do it. 1, hire an accountant or someone like our service to just do it for you, okay? It's gonna be more expensive, but it's a very viable option, okay? 2, do them on your own from scratch. Or maybe you find a free tool out there or something, but I can assure you, if it's free, it's probably not gonna be all that helpful at getting what you need. So that's one way to do it, but it can be complex and it's gonna be a lot of work. And if you need to make massive changes to your numbers, you're gonna have to do a lot of changes. Third option is buy a tool, like a template from an accountant or someone that knows what they're doing. Hence, that's what I'm showing you. Okay, so I've said we've helped more than 50,000 people create their financial projections largely through these templates that we have for more than 100 different industries. And so let me show it to you real quick, okay? So this is kind of the output. But all you do, it's very easy to use. We've got these 4 blue tabs where you're gonna put in the information you know about your co-working space. So what kind of things are you gonna have to buy to get started? The name, are you gonna have any investors? Are you gonna have any loans, okay? And then this page seems overwhelming, but I'll remind you, we're only touching the blue sections. So we're gonna talk about are we gonna do advertising to try and attract members? Here we're gonna outline what our different plans are, our membership plans. We're gonna have additional services that they can include in that. If we're gonna do office rentals, that's included in here too, the ability to do that. If you're gonna have like a cafe or a cafeteria or a coffee shop, you can include that in here as well. And sections can be repurposed if you're gonna sell a different thing or offer a different service. Are you gonna offer events? People can book the space to be able to do those, okay? So we just fill out the blue sections that are necessary in our example. And then you put in your monthly, overhead costs, recurring monthly expenses. This is all pre-filled out, so you at least have a starting point to help you kind of get this going. And then if you're going to have any salaried employees, you'll input them here. And then that's it. It will generate all of this other stuff, the financial statements that your lender will want and need. And if you make a tweak to it, all those things will automatically update. It's very easy to use. I promise you. Okay, so that plug being over, having financial projections is not key point number 4. You have to have financial projections. Key point number 4 is that they need to be realistic and within kind of industry norms. And you might be wondering, well, how am I supposed to know what's realistic and what's not? The best advice I can give you is either well, let me just show you. Pull up your projections. This at a glance tab is handy because it has some just a collection, a summary of all of our key numbers. And we can just do a Google search or anything based on any number you see in your projections to find out what's typical for the industry. Or you can, I've got an example pulled up here. Use a tool like ChatGPT if you're comfortable with it. And I just asked it, what are some typical financial benchmarks and averages for a co-working space? Okay, and it's going out there and it's collected all this knowledge from the world and from the website, and it's given us some things to compare. So an obvious one is profit margin. Net profit margins can range from 10% to 30%. So let me come back and I can see profit. This is gross, okay, but let's look at net profit margin. Big loss in the first year, not surprising, okay? There's expensive to get it started and get it opened. But then 20%, 32%, 33%, 34%. Okay, so we're close to that range. That's a good sign that we're probably in a pretty realistic space. And you can do that for any number, right? So here's average revenue per user. Typical is $150 to $500 per month. Let's go back. We have average revenue per member per year. So that was $150 to $500 per month was what the recommendation was, and we're well within that. We're even at the bottom range of that, okay? So that's the practice. That's all you need to do. You create your projections, and you just spend a little bit extra time, and you just go out and benchmark that. You do some research. You fill out your projections with what you know and what you understand, and then you benchmark that based upon what's typical for the industry. Okay, and then that's going to bring us to the end of the business plan with one last key point. This key point, you're not actually going to write your business plan. This is more just for you to be prepared, especially if you're seeking a loan or financing for your co-working space, and that is being prepared to talk about or demonstrate skin in the game. Similar to, buying a house, there's a few things that you need to understand. Let's say you're trying to buy a house for $100,000. The bank is not going to lend you 100% of that. You're going to have to put down a deposit or a down payment or something, right? So let's say 10% or 20%. You're going to pay that. If you fail to pay back the loan, you're going to lose your deposit, your $10,000 to $20,000 that you put in. You're also going to lose the house because it's the collateral on the mortgage of the loan. It's going to be a very similar experience with a business loan. Okay, so if you need $1 million to get your co-working space started, the bank is probably going to expect a 10 to 20% personal cash investment, and you will have to contribute that, right? So that's going to be contributed, and they're also going to want the loan to be secured with collateral if possible. So they're going to look at business collateral first. If you're using part of the loan to buy a building, that's probably most of your collateral right there. If you're renting a space, most of the things you're going to put in there are not going to be considered collateral, whether that's like desks or that kind of stuff isn't going to be a ton of collateral. So they're probably going to ask if you have any personal collateral, right? So you just need to be prepared. Like, are you willing to put a second mortgage on your house? Are you willing to pledge a free and clear car? Another example of that might be they might need to see a cosigner if there's a collateral shortfall to get more comfortable. So the only reason I'm telling you this is I'm not telling you have to pledge these things or commit these things. Just be prepared to know what you're willing to offer. So when it comes to that point and they ask for it, you've already made a decision or you've already done the work to be ready for that. So if they say, if you can think of who might be a good cosigner you would ask right now, have that conversation ahead of time with that person. Make sure that they're interested. You don't have to tell your lender that. Maybe they'll never even ask for a cosigner. But if that point comes up and that's what they need to get the deal done, then you can go back to and you can say, well, I already have someone that I know would be willing to cosign. So that's my encouragement to you, is just understand what you're willing to pledge and what you're willing to not, and be comfortable walking away. And the last piece of advice I'll give you is, all the time when I was a lender, I would hear people say that they want the business the loan to be in the business's name and not the personal name. And that sounds great, and that's great advice when it comes to accounting and bookkeeping and your bank accounts and all of that. That's not real advice when it comes to getting a business loan. You will be required to personally guarantee on the loan. Anyone over 20% of ownership is probably going to be required to personally guarantee on the loan, and you will be on the hook for that personally. So just dispelling that myth for you, that's not really something that is done. So there you have it. That is how to write a co-working space business plan. Grab your version of this down the description below. And as a gift for saying thanks for sticking around, if you're interested in the financial projections, I should have mentioned, we have a video guide that shows you how to fill out the whole thing. You can use PH20BP and get that template, co-working space projection template, for 20% off. So if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. Consider subscribing to the channel. That helps us as a fellow small business. And let us know if you have any questions. Email us at support@projectionhub.com. Leave a comment on the video and we'll get back to you.